Good afternoon. Welcome to the April 22nd, 2021 City Council Law and Regulation Committee. To help minimize the spread of COVID-19, members of the public may call in if they have any public comment. We'll have plenty of opportunity for public comment. The number they can call into is 916-774-5353. We'll have silent roll call. We'll call the meeting to order. And I'd like to call on Helen Dreyer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Right. At this point, we'll open it up for public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments? Should we wait a few minutes to see if anyone calls in with any comments on non-agenda items? Not hearing the phone ring. I think we'll go to the next item, and that's item 5, the minutes, item 5.1, minutes of the prior meetings. We've reviewed the minutes of the prior meetings, and we'll take a motion to accept the minutes.
I move to accept the minutes from the prior meeting.
And I'll second it. So unanimous consent. All right. Now we'll go to the reports from each of our various government affairs folks. We'll start off with Amber Blix and the Electric Department priority legislation for April 2021. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Hudeshelt, Councilmember Mendonça. I wanted to start out my presentation today with a brief overview and update of kind of where we're at in the legislative session. Next slide, please. So the policy committee deadlines are upon us in late April and early May. We also have the fiscal committee deadlines for the appropriations committee. So that means that all bills that are in the same house of origin need to go to the appropriations committee by May 21st. And then we also have the house of origin deadline, which is June 4th, which is the last day for bills to be passed out of the house that they were introduced in. What I want to talk about today on the state legislation side is first some successful outreach on one of the bills that we've discussed with the committee previously. Also going to touch a bit on some bills that deal with transportation electrification, natural gas plants, climate emergency mitigation. And then on the federal side, we're going to be talking about the American Jobs Plan and the Clean Future Act. Next slide, please. So first is AB 433, and this was the bill that I wanted to talk about with some successful outreach that we've had. You'll recall we brought this bill to the committee previously, and this is the bill we had a watch position on that would require us to do a voluntary contribution on utility bills to aid wildfire mitigation. There was no requirement that funds would return to the city where they are collected, and the utility would really be responsible for the financial and administrative side of things on the collection side. We met with the author's staff after one of our last committee meetings and really had a successful meeting with them, with our trade partners. We're able to express our concerns that the utility had regarding some of the financial and administrative burdens. And since that time, the author has let us know that they're no longer going to be pursuing that bill. And I wanted to bring this up because I know we had a discussion in one of our previous committee meetings about how our advocacy and our position works. And so this is one of the ones that we obviously had some concerns with, but we took a watch on it in hopes that we would be able to meet with the author and have some positive outcomes. And so I just wanted to report that we did have a positive outcome. And in the meeting that we had with our trade association, Roseville was the only city to participate in that meeting. So we thought it was a really good outcome there, aside from our trade representatives. Next slide, please.
And can I do, sorry,
Yeah,
those trade partners are CMUA or
Yes,
was it NCPA?
That particular meeting was scheduled with CMUA, and Roseville participated.
California Municipal Utility Association. I shouldn't use acronyms. Thank you.
Great. And okay, so the next bill, AB 641, this is on transportation electrification, and it's really looking at specifically local publicly owned electric utilities. And it would require us to develop a transportation electrification plan to support the electric vehicle goals in the state, as well as some of the greenhouse gas reduction goals. And the transportation plan would need to include investments to facilitate charging infrastructure, as well as rate structures that promote transportation electrification. And we've been working with our trade partners, both the California Municipal Utilities Association as well as the Northern California Power Agency, on amendments that would be less prescriptive on specific rate structures, that would kind of look to rebates and some of the things that we've already put in action here, and also would allow this to be included as part of our integrated resource plan and not a new transportation electrification plan that could be duplicative of things that we're already doing. Some of those amendments just came through today. We've got a significant portion of those amendments included now, but we're going to continue to work with the author to kind of get us to 100% of where we would need to be. Next slide, please. AB 1270 by Assemblymember Rivas is on natural gas plants, methane monitoring systems, and reporting. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but high level, this bill would require a natural gas plant owner to install a fence line monitoring system to measure and record methane concentrations. And it would also require the owner to collect real-time data from fence line monitoring systems and maintain records and provide that data to the public. We had taken a watch position on it and had identified a few issues of concern for us, but this bill has recently been made into a 2-year bill, which means it'll be addressed probably next year or potentially not at all, depending on what the author decides to do with it. So we'll continue to monitor that as that process moves forward. Next slide. SB 551 also deals with transportation electrification and is the California Electric Vehicle Authority bill. And this bill would establish the California Electric Vehicle Authority within the governor's office to kind of coordinate all the different state agency activities that are going on with regards to EVs and zero emission charging infrastructure. And it would also promote equity, workforce, and economic development to support the sector statewide. We're continuing to watch this bill to see what funding opportunities may arise out of this process, and really to kind of ensure that the authority doesn't become a new regulatory agency over publicly owned utilities in terms of electric vehicle implementation. So we'll continue to watch that bill. SB 582 by Stern is dealing with climate emergency mitigation and safe restoration and Just Resilience Act of 2021. We have a watch on this bill. Really trying to see kind of what the direction is and whether this bill continues to gain momentum or not throughout the rest of the session. And really what it does is it doubles the existing GHG reduction goal of 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 to 80% below 1990 levels by 2030. So it's a significant increase in kind of our reduction of emissions that we need to achieve. It also requires the agencies to create a climate restoration plan to maintain net negative GHG emissions in California no later than 2035 and kind of specify those carbon removal targets before 2035 to facilitate these goals. And also kind of task the agencies that are involved with developing a just resilient plan for investments in vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. So this is kind of a big picture plan that's out there. Our sense is that this may kind of get a lot of pushback from industry statewide, and so we're going to continue to watch this bill to see where it goes. And I just, before I move out into the federal bills, just want to say you can kind of see that a lot of the state bills are focused on electrification, climate mitigation, and then kind of other things that are going on. But those are two big factors that are going on. And the 2030 and 2035 dates are two that I would just keep in your mind as targets that a lot of the legislators are looking at for climate reduction and emission reduction measures. In terms of federal legislation, the big one that's a big ticket item is the American Jobs Plan. This portion is just going to focus on the electric portion. I know some of my colleagues are going to talk about some of the other sectors that are in the bill. This plan proposes a $174 billion investment in electric vehicle market, and that's really to spur the supply chains, retool factories, and complete globally to support American workers to make batteries and electric vehicles. And the plan will establish grant and incentive programs for state and local governments and the private sector to build 500,000 EV chargers by 2030. The plan also proposes to utilize the tools of the federal procurement to electrify the federal fleet, including the United States Postal Service. And another component of the plan includes a path to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035 and a 24/7 clean electricity goal for federal buildings. It's really centered around jobs and trying to make America a clean leader in some of these technologies going forward. We're continuing to watch this bill to see what components of the proposed plan will gain support from Congress. Many of these components of this plan have already been proposed in California legislation, including that last bullet on the slide there. Both of those have been proposed so far in California. And we're trying to see if any of these accelerated goals that are applying in California may also apply in this plan. So something that we're going to continue to watch as things go forward. Some information that I've received today on a call that I was on is that maybe this could be split into multiple bills to get the support that it needs, and that could probably be a process that could come on the infrastructure side and then also the clean energy side. Next slide. And then one we discussed before, just wanted to highlight a few of the energy sides of the Federal Clean Future Act. That's HR 1512 by Pallone. This is a national goal to achieve net zero GHG emissions no later than 2050 and requires all retail electricity suppliers to reach 80% clean electricity by 2030 and 100% by 2035. Authorizes $500 million to deploy electric vehicle supply equipment, and establishes the Office of Energy Equity in the Department of Energy to reduce or stabilize energy costs in underserved communities. This is one that we're continuing to watch, but you can see there's a lot of similarities between the state legislation targets as well as the federal targets. And the two federal bills are somewhat similar in the goals that they're trying to achieve as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Mendoza.
I just had one question. Amber, thank you for the presentation, very detailed. On the second to last slide, I just had a question, just off the top of your head, or if you know exact numbers, how many electric vehicle chargers or stations do we currently have in Roseville? I mean, are we way behind the curve? Are we where we should be? I mean, do we have a lot?
No, I don't know the exact number, but I know it's something that we're looking at closely, especially with all of these goals going through, and we have a lot of incentives and programs that have already been started so far. I mean, a couple of those state bills we're talking about looking specifically at publicly owned utilities, so we know that that's coming, and we're getting ahead of that and have been active on the electric vehicle front. But I can find out more and provide you with a number.
I was just curious, if this was, we're not starting from scratch, obviously. I mean, we've got some, so I'm assuming we're probably, like every other jurisdiction, I mean, we're probably have the same amount or maybe a little less, a little more, but we're not behind. We're probably at where everybody else is, or just a little over or under, right? I mean, we're not way behind anybody that you're aware of.
Yeah, I don't think we're behind, and I think we're definitely planning for more. So that's on the horizon for sure.
Thank you.
Amber, a couple of questions, and I didn't write down the bill number, but you use the term vulnerable populations. Familiar with underserved, disadvantaged communities, economically, but vulnerable, does that have its own definition that's specific to this legislation?
Yeah, so I think, let's see if I think that was SB 582.
I think it was, yeah.
So that bill is really looking at, so it's vulnerable and disadvantaged communities, which I think, to your point, are two different things. The disadvantaged communities, I think, is something that we've generally kind of know. Vulnerable communities, this is talking about the climate emergency mitigation. And so I think it's based on where you live. If you're a vulnerable community based on climate change, for example, they're looking at things like that to help those populations.
So there used to be a term, and probably still is, sensitive receptors, that, if you're in a school that's near a freeway, then you could be viewed as a sensitive receptor. And
yeah, I think this might even be a little different than that. Okay. I think of vulnerable in the sense of vulnerable to climate change effects at a higher rate than others may be somewhere else, for example.
Well, I think Noel Kramer's going to tell us we're all vulnerable given this water year. So the other thing is there's a House resolution you have there. Does a House resolution, HR stands for House Resolution, right?
HR,
1512.
House
Hello?
of Representatives is what I meant there.
I'm sorry. Okay. All right. I was thinking it stood for a resolution, and I was going to ask you if a resolution carried the same weight as legislation. So
There's a different process for that, as far as I know.
that's all I had. And yeah, your reports and between the time we got the staff report and today, indicative of how fast things are moving.
Yes.
You had more information here than we had when we got the reports. So thanks.
Yes.
We'll open it up for any public comment on these issues. We'll give it.
Thank you.
Thank you for a very good report. Next up, aforementioned Noel. Gonna make it, Noel, are you gonna make it rain?
Kramers.
Huh?
And it's Matic, not Kramers.
But, I'm
Sure, it's for
sorry.
a different organization.
I know. Too many.
I won't hold it against you.
Please don't. All right. Next up, we're going to have a report on environmental utilities priority legislation, starting off with Noel Maddock, not Noel Kramer.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Howdy-Schultz and Council Member Mendonça. EU is switching things up this month. As you will note in our staff report has been reorganized. Issues going forward will be presented state first, followed by federal, and legislation will appear in bill order by House. However, in order to avoid any confusion at the podium, we're going to go ahead and continue giving our presentations by division. So I will continue to present for water and waste services, and then Marisa Tricas will present for wastewater and recycled water issues. As Amber has noted, we are nearing the House of Origin deadlines, and bills are moving quickly and changing drastically. So with that, I will go ahead and jump in with our water issues. I'm going to talk about the first two bills first. And like AB 59 from last month, the first two bills I'm covering today deal with the ability of the city to recover costs based on the impacts of new development. On Monday, I confirmed that with committee staff that AB 678 is going to be held over and turned into a 2-year bill. So I'm going to focus my comments this afternoon on AB 602, which will be heard tomorrow. Over the past several years, the legislature has been looking for ways to spur development for affordable housing. Assemblyman Grayson has taken the mantle, and his attention has been focused on impact fees and connection and capacity charges. As Roseville continues to build out, it is important that we have the ability to offset the impacts of the new development rather than putting those burdens on our current residents and businesses. This is commonly accomplished through mitigation fees as well as development agreements. The City of Roseville supports efforts to develop diverse housing opportunities, but feels focusing on the fees being charged is short-sighted, and new programs to replace redevelopment agencies would be a better solution. After the next set of amendments, we are anticipating AB 602 to our state associations to actually move to a watch position because they were successful in amending out capacity charges as well as connection fees, which are part of what the wastewater and water agencies charge. However, the proposal does have citywide impacts that place new and cumbersome obligations on local governments and do not actually help to lower the cost of development. So staff is anticipating that Roseville will continue with our oppose unless amended position in coordination with the city manager's office as well as the League of Cities. The next measure I'm going to cover is SB 378. And this measure actually made it out of committee when the author accepted the committee's amendments, which actually clarify that the bill does not preempt or limit application of the DigSafe rules and the California Public Utility Commission's General Order 128, which governs construction of underground electric communication lines in the state of California. When these amendments are in print, I anticipate that our associations will move to a watch position, and I will work with the city manager's office to assure all of our concerns have been addressed, and will report back to the committee when our position has been updated. The next issue is in support of what we've just were indicating. The governor has declared a targeted drought in 2 counties, and the president pro tem actually, along with some of her fellow senators, have put forth a $2 billion budget proposal to help the state combat future droughts. In developing her proposal, she asked for sample projects that should be eligible for funding, and Roseville took the lead in helping the region submit a list of projects through multiple avenues. The projects will facilitate the development of our regional water bank, and staff is working with our lobbyists to advance 2 projects that we submitted as part of our region's ask. The 2 projects we submitted will be completed in partnership with the Placer County Water Agency and the Citrus Heights Water District. Combined, the projects provide a new conveyance facility and several interties so that we can have a robust conjunctive use program. While it will also help the city, it is also integral for the regional water bank that will provide regional resiliency during drought conditions, and potentially the state meet its environmental goals during a drought. Through the efforts of our lobbyists, we have secured a letter of support from Senator Nielsen, directed to the President Pro Tem, requesting direct funding for our projects in her drought proposal. The drought package is actually anticipated to be heard tomorrow, and I will report back to the committee on our efforts. Just as this morning, the agenda was released for the committee hearing tomorrow, and there is $200 million that is set aside for projects that fit what we are looking for, the conveyance as well as the interties, and it has multiple benefits and all of that kind of stuff. So very excited. Also, a little preview too, because this is not even on our list. There is $1 billion set aside for arrearages in the package as well. So that's good. And staff is going to be reviewing that, and we'll very likely be pushing forward a position on that as well soon. I'm going to keep my comments brief on the lead and copper rule because we're waiting for the Environmental Protection Agency to take their next actions to see if they're actually going to initiate a new rulemaking. And the final issue that we have for the Water Division is the American Jobs Plan, which was put forward by President Biden, which was a total $2.2 trillion 8-year infrastructure investment proposal. For the water-specific portion, we were a little disappointed with the proposed investment of $111 billion for water infrastructure, as a large portion of that is actually going for grants to eliminate all lead pipes and service lines in the country. Compared to the more eastern partners, states in California has actually invested a lot of money already in inventorying and removing lead pipes, fixtures, and service lines. So we're kind of already ahead. So we don't anticipate we're going to actually qualify for a lot of that funding. But for water, there is $56 billion to upgrade and modernize drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. $45 billion to eliminate the lead pipes, and $10 billion to monitor and remediate PFAS substances in drinking water. And as Amber had mentioned, this is very early. Now it's going to go into Congress, and the president's going to be working with Congress to figure out what will actually move forward. Moving on to the waste services, the first bill is AB 377. And as noted in the staff report, Roseville joined our associations in taking a straight opposed position on AB 377 with the hope that we would be able to stop the bill in committee last week. The author, Assemblymember Robert Rivas, accepted significant amendments in committee and was able to advance the bill when he committed to continuing to work with stakeholders. While the author has been willing to amend his bill, there's broad consensus amongst our associations that the only way to make it workable would be to fundamentally change the bill, and the author and sponsors are just unwilling. The bill is now in Appropriations Committee and will need to make it out by May 21st. This is where the legislation will be evaluated based upon its costs. Just this morning, I received a request from Aqua to help pull together some estimated costs to comply with this bill so that we can provide that to the Department of Finance as well as the committee consultants. The next two bills we are tracking because they have the potential to help Roseville convert our fleets to zero-emission vehicles. Through our associations, we are supporting both bills. As a reminder, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N7920, which calls for 100% of in-state medium and heavy-duty vehicle sales to be zero emission by 2045. And as I reported last month, the California Air Resources Board is pushing for a purchasing requirement on public agencies that will require us to begin converting our entire fleets in 2023. AB 1110 would establish a state master service agreement for zero-emission fleet vehicles, which could help us leverage better prices on those types of vehicles for our fleet. SB 372 would require the California Pollution Control Financing Authority to establish new financing tools and supports to enable operators like Roseville in transitioning our fleets to zero-emission vehicles. The last issue for this afternoon for me is an update on our efforts on the proposed Clean Fleets regulation. This month, Roseville signed on to a Specialty Vehicle Coalition letter expressing our concerns within our heavy-duty fleets that respond to emergencies such as our electric, water, wastewater, and refuse vehicles. While these vehicles are used on a daily basis, they are designed and built to respond with mutual aid during emergencies and to help clean up after natural disasters like floods, fires, and earthquakes. We are also working on a Roseville-specific letter to address the closed-loop system we have created to convert our organic waste and wastewater sludge into renewable natural gas to fuel the refuse fleet and the wastewater treatment plant. We have also met with two of the new California Air Resources Board members, Tanya Pacheco-Werner from the Central Valley and Davina Hurt, who is a council member from the city of Belmont, and was really nice to talk to her because she completely understood what we were talking about because she was also a member of the South Bayside Waste Management Authority. So she gets exactly what we were doing, what we're trying to accomplish here. Conversations went well with both of them. Next month, we're meeting with the new chair of the board, Leanne Randolph, and the new board member, Gideon Krovov. And I will be sure to come back and keep you guys updated on our efforts with the development of that regulation. This concludes my portion of EU's presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Mendoza, you?
Thank you, Noel. I have just one question. So on the lead pipe replacement, I mean, I'm assuming we're not the only state that's been proactive in replacing this. This has been an issue for a while. And you said so are we able to maybe join with other jurisdictions to maybe get some credit towards, us being ahead of the curve on this? Or is this just going to result in us getting less just because we happen to have the misfortune of being ahead of the curve?
I'm going to say we probably are going to have the misfortune of just being ahead of the curve on this.
Just thought I'd ask. It's nice to be ahead, but, not at the cost of, dollars that we could use to implement other things. So, all right, thank you.
Yeah,
Back to you.
it's proactively going forward. Another aspect of that portion of it is they are wanting us to place obligations on public agencies to replace on the customer side of the meter, which does pose some liability issues that we're a little worried about.
Would we control that schedule, or is that going to be mandated, so many and so much time, or would we be able to look at what our resources are and what we could get done, and would we be able to dictate what that is, or is that dictated to us?
That would be on the federal side if we were accepting that funding. They're wanting us to use it. In state, we've had legislation that was passed several years ago where we had to inventory and figure out exactly where we have lead service lines, and then we have a plan to move forward to eliminate all of the service lines. And here in Roseville, we're doing great. If I'm not mistaken, I think we've pretty much removed all of the lead service lines, so that isn't an issue. But I can get back to you with specifics.
No, I think I'm good. I was just, more curious than anything else. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Back to you, Bruce.
You mentioned $1 billion in arrearage that might be in the legislation. Explain arrearage to me. I think I know what that means, but I want to make sure I understand.
So the arrearage is over the last year during COVID, there was a moratorium on shutoffs on both, actually for electric, water, wastewater, and here at Roseville, because we have all of the services under one roof, we elected not to charge.
Right.
And
That's what I thought.
so it's basically
Sometimes
the money that folks have not been able to pay. So it's really trying to help those that were most hurt during the pandemic to bring them current.
Great, thank you. I was hoping that was what it was, but sometimes those words get used in a different context, so thanks for
Yes.
that. And then you mentioned conjunctive use.
Yes.
How much surface water, groundwater, is that to be determined by the participating, I think you said Citrus Heights, Roseville, and...
Right.
Yeah.
So the conjunctive use is really between all of the agencies, especially within the region during a drought. The conjunctive use portion of it is the new conveyance facility is through PCWA. And when there's times of excess
Right.
surface water, we will be taking that and putting it into our groundwater wells, so using our ASR system. And then during droughts, we would then be able to, we have the new interconnection with Citrus Heights, we would be able to convey that water so they would not have to rely on surface water.
We would take the water probably at American, up in Auburn, at Ophir.
And that's the other big issue and why it's such a great project, is because it's alleviating pressures on Folsom Lake, because we would be taking water further up the stream.
Terrific, thanks.
Sure.
I neglected to ask Amber, but I'll ask you because I think it's a crossover issue.
Uh-oh.
So Shasta began to implement bypass flows, which means that they're not generating hydropower to address the cold water pool, and cold water is important for fish survival, salmon and other fish species survival. Did that happen, and is it still happening? You can get back to me.
I will defer, but I do recall reading something.
Right.
But I will turn it over to Amber so she can answer.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll just answer really quickly. Yes, it did happen, and my understanding is it is currently happening. Yeah.
Right.
And I think the idea, the decision that was made was to kind of try to do that before the summer months when the power might be needed at more crucial energy times.
Yep, and save the cold water for
For the fish, yes.
thank you. Sorry to be.
I thought I could sneak away.
No. Do you want to tell us anything about our dry conditions right now? Okay.
So
Dry. They're dry and, and they're likely to, the Bureau and DWR, I mean, I think we're in good shape here in Roseville.
in Roseville, we are in good shape.
Right.
We have enough water supplies to meet the needs of our residents as well as our business operators.
But the State Water Resources Control Board for others are likely to issue notices of water not being available sometime in June, right?
We are watching very closely what the State Water Board is doing. We do anticipate hopefully not doing what they did in 2015 and earlier by doing the draconian, just everybody has to cut a certain percentage. We're hoping that the governor set a good tone in his speech where he declared the very targeted drought conditions in 2 specific counties. And he did talk about needing to make sure that it's based upon the local conditions.
But because we were able to take excess Bureau water in 2019 and put it into the groundwater, into our groundwater basin through the aquifer storage and recovery, we'll be able to have a shock absorber in that supply.
Is that, as well as we have a great partnership with the Placer County Water Agency, and so we have made sure that our community is covered.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Marisa Tricas.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Haudashelt and Councilmember Mendonça. I'll give a brief update on a few priority bills that the wastewater utility is covering. So the first one is our AB 818, and that is regarding the sale or advertisement of any disposable wipe product labeled as flushable or sewer and septic safe. Roseville has 700 miles of collection system and treatment plant equipment that requires intensive manual labor and resources to remove and clear these purportedly flushable wipes, but they get caught in our system and initiate major disruptive blockages and cost our city taxpayers money. And that's why we're asking for support of this bill. Also, the City of Roseville during the pandemic saw a drastic increase in the use of non-flushable wipes, so we're have made this bill a priority and are watching it closely. Additionally, this month we had the pleasure of providing a tour to some of our SPWA members where, thank you Vice Mayor Haudashelt for joining, and he was able to see what these wipes look like in real time in our grates and how they really are very costly to our utilities. So it was cool to see implementing government relations in real time. Additional updates on this bill is Mayor Bernasconi signed on to a coalition letter with our associations, and also a wastewater utility in South Carolina brought a class action lawsuit against the wholesalers who sell and manufacture these wipes. And in that settlement, it outlines standards that require a series of tests prior to these wholesalers selling the wipes. So city staff will work with our associations to evaluate some of these standards and provide comment as well. Finally, the other bill is SB 273, and our position went from watch last month to support. And essentially this bill would extend the authority for the wastewater utility to voluntarily enter into projects involving diversion and treatment of stormwater or dry weather runoff in partnership with our wastewater utility and stormwater, So for a good example of this is through the WIFIA project that we updated you all on in Pure Water Roseville. We can use some of the stormwater diversion to use as recycled water for irrigation, for example. So this bill is support, and Mayor Bernasconi also submitted a letter of support on our behalf. So we think this legislation promotes regional water management and innovation and future opportunities to enhance our water supply reliability. And with that, any questions?
Thank you very much. I'm glad we are supporting that AB 818, those disposable wipes.
Yep,
It's a
me
good thing.
too.
Yeah.
And it was a long process too, Councilmember Mendonça. It was a 2-year bill last year and didn't get passed. So it's very the associations and utilities are really happy this month for it.
Take the win when you can get it.
Exactly.
And what is the status? I'm trying to look on our priority legislation. Is it,
For 818,
yeah. So
it's going, it was approved in committee and now it's in appropriations.
Okay. All right. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think this is the point in time we ask for any public comment on our environmental utilities legislation. We'll wait a few minutes to see if anyone calls in. A few seconds, not minutes. Okay. Next up, we're going to have state and federal priority legislation. Mr. Walensky.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Haudashelt and Councilmember Mendoza. I'm Mark Walensky, Government Relations Administrator, and I'm joined this afternoon for this presentation by Rob Becerra, the Police Department's Public Information Officer. Our report this afternoon includes an overview of some of the key priority bills with a particular focus on public safety and information technology. And this report provides an overview of the tracked legislation the Police Department has identified as most critical, a series of bills that represents the range of issues that are important to the IT department, other legislation and information relating to the American Jobs Plan. So transitioning to the public safety portion of the report, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Rob Becerra.
Thank you very much, Mark. The city's government relations team has identified 188 bills that could potentially have an impact on the Roseville Police Department. In an effort to maximize our resources onto the most critical pieces of legislation, we've broken down into our top 20 bills and divided them into 9 categories. You have that breakdown on the staff report. So instead of going over all 20, one of the things that we've done is we're going to highlight 8 pieces of legislation that we are actively supporting or opposing. I'm going to roll through some of them, and I'll give you a little more information on one at the end. So initially, I'll start with our opposition to AB 89. This is by Joan Sawyer, related to peace officers and minimum qualifications. This measure would increase the minimum qualifying age of peace officers from 18 to 25. This is something that we've discussed before, but we've now actively taken an opposed position on AB 89. We're opposing SB 2 listed there on the screen. I'll come back to SB 2 later because we do have some I'll call it late-breaking news that on the status of SB 2. We're opposing AB 26. This is a Holden bill, and this is peace officers' use of force. This bill would require officers to immediately report incidents of force and intercede when observing another officer using excessive force. We have existing policy right now that covers this element of the bill. Here's the adjustments. It would make excessive force resulting in great bodily injury or death, and a failure to intercede with an officer would result in disqualification from law enforcement. It would also make the observing officer who does not intercede or report the intercede an accessory to the crime. Again, we already have existing policy in place that covers much of this, and so we are currently taking an opposed position on AB 26. We're opposing AB 48. This is by Gonzalez, Law Enforcement, Kinetic Energy Projectiles, and Chemical Agents. This bill would prohibit the use of kinetic energy projectiles or projectiles or chemical agents in order to disperse an assembly, a protest, or a demonstration. Our primary concern here is taking away less lethal options for officers. It creates a really challenging situation. So we're currently opposing AB 48. We're opposing SB 210. This is the bill that we've talked about several times before, and this is the Wiener bill related to automatic license plate recognition systems, requiring the data to be removed after 24 hours. Currently opposing this SB 210. We're opposing SB 98 by McGuire. Again, we've touched on this one. This is the media access. We're requiring media access to have law enforcement command posts in closed areas. Again, opposing SB 98. Moving on to two pieces of legislation that we're supporting. We are supporting AB 331 by Joan Sawyer related to organized theft. This maintains the classification and carries through the classification of organized retail theft that is expiring. We thought this was something critically important to the city, just given our business community, our shopping centers, but certainly supporting the continuation of organized retail theft. And also the bill includes a little bit of onerous onto the California Highway Patrol for creating a statewide program to track organized retail criminal gangs and units. So there could potentially be some good things that come out of this, trying to combat the challenges we currently face with organized retail theft. We are also supporting SB 387. This is the I won't call it opposing bill to SB 210, but this is the peace officer certification education requirements. This is the bill that our trade association partners are working on to create create a recruitment strategy for peace officers, but also create post-training standards that all law enforcement could agree on, and basically elevating the position of a police officer now. Going to end my comments with details related to SB 210. This is a bill by Bradford, and this is Peace Officer Certification and Civil Rights. This measure would outline the standards for peace officer decertification and would eliminate qualified immunity for peace officers and custodial officers, as well as public entities employing peace officers or custodial officers if sued. So yesterday, part of this bill was heard in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Specifically, they were reviewing the part related to how it was tied the ability to file a civil rights claim in state court. Currently, this is done in federal court. Along with allowing this to occur in the state level, it would significantly lower the bar for what constitutes a civil rights violation. On the officer-employee end, it would mean a much more lower level for determining if actions were within the law. And on the city end, we believe it created a much higher likelihood for increased lawsuits against the city. On a side note, the primary backers and proponents for this bill are the California Trial Lawyers Association. Cal Chiefs and other organizations thought they had gained some concessions with the bill author, but late in the night, the author came out and said that he was no longer open to any amendments. So yesterday morning, Cal Chiefs had an emergency phone call with all of their membership. I don't know if I've actually announced to this group, but our police chief is actually one of the new regional representatives, Region 5 rep for Cal Chiefs, and he has become very involved further with Cal Chiefs organization. The emergency call basically was reaching out to the agency partners to express their opposition for SB 2. We participated in the public hearing portion of the Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday. We voiced our opposition on behalf of the city, and I will say the bill did eventually move out of the Judiciary Committee, but the author did make a strong commitment to work with our trade associations and Cal Chiefs on some amendments. So we do believe there was some portion of a win where the author, Bradford, is now agreeing to some amendments. And specifically to this, we support the conversation for officer decertification. That is a big move from a year ago when this bill came up, where that was not on the table. Our trade associations have moved forward with officer decertification, but the big concern really falls in the other elements of the bill. So it is ongoing, but at current status, we are opposing SB2, and that's the latest news that we have at this point. Open to any questions.
So it sounds like on SB2, with the later concession that the author is now open to some revisions, but we just don't know where that nod is going to come from. Just
Exactly. And I think, this is all a part of, one, the city's continued legislative advocacy to push forward the message from not only Cal Chiefs, but the city of Roseville with our concerns. And I will say this, SB2 remains at the top of, I would say, my radar and as well as Mark's radar for something that we're working to influence.
And then I had another follow-up question on SB 387. So if the increase in age bill passes, this is probably not related to the bill, but I just kind of wanted to get your opinion if you're hearing anything. So if the age increases from, I think, 18 to 25 is what they're proposing, will that affect this SB 387 because will they have to adjust the post classes and the courses and a lot of that training because of that age requirement now, or are they going to just adopt that, keep that the same no matter what the entry-level age group is?
I think there will have to be some significant adjustments made on post standpoint if it goes to 25. I should say, and I didn't mention, which I'm sure you recall, is or a bachelor's degree. So you can have a bachelor's degree or be 25 to qualify. If 387 it were to move forward, well, excuse me, if the bill to increase the age moves forward, I see a significant challenge on the recruitment front. And just finding those qualified candidates. Also, we talked about this last time of growing our own officers from within the department creates that significant gap for us to be able to move someone from an explorer to a cadet to a traffic CSO onto an officer. We definitely have some concerns over it.
So is there no possibility or no carve out if we had a lateral transfer from out of state who might be 19, 18, 19, even 20, who's already sworn peace officer 832, everything that would qualify them in this state except for this bill requirement? Or is it just all or nothing? They have to hit that age?
I think there will definitely be some, if it moved forward, there will definitely be some nuances that will have to be determined. Now, I can say most agencies in our region hire at 21, most. And so I can say there's going to be that significant challenge of 21 to 24 on if they're hireable, if they're coming from another agency. So in the bill language, it would require, if we have any officer who falls into this, they're 22 years old, they don't, and they don't have that, education, then they can actually, they're grandfathered in. But, again, we do see some significant challenges, all yet to be determined if it moved forward.
Very good. Thank you, Rob.
Mm-hmm. Councilman Mendoza, it is great to have your depth of knowledge on these topics. So good questions. Mr. Becerra, AB 331, organized theft. Would that extend to events like came to fruition yesterday with EDD fraud and that? Or is this narrowly focused on retail?
I think the case you're referencing yesterday that we put the information out was the large scale. Not only was it EDD fraud, it was drug trafficking, human trafficking, gun trafficking, large criminal network, including EDD fraud. I would say two very, very different situations. The organized retail theft really goes down to the combination of the 950 number with the intent to sell in large quantities, right? So we're not talking about, a mom who steals a bottle of formula and leaves the store. We're talking about the group who you pull over and they have a trunk full of formula bottles, from 7 different targets, each, at around $500 to $600 per. Organized retail theft lets us put all of those thefts together to create a larger case, plus the fact that they are working together to steal and then use it as some other organized fashion. So, yeah.
Well, I thought that would be the answer, but I really wanted to use my question as a vehicle to thank the women and men of our Roseville PD, and I think it was a joint operation, for their diligence and persistence. I guess it would started in November, so yeah. So every time I see you or the chief or others, I will highlight that incredible work that was done there. So thank you.
Thank you.
I want to echo Vice Mayor Havishelt's nice work this week, or last week, on that EDD bust. And tell everybody back at the station, nice job on that write-up today, in the B as well.
I will give 100% of the credit to our crime suppression unit, and I know both of you are fully aware that our crime suppression unit was created several years ago by our current police chief, and has continued to be a very successful part of the department. So thanks. I will pass your sentiments along.
It's nice they were able to get away from the Heritage Inn. They actually do some other police work in the region. So thank you.
Mr. Becerra, thank you for your report.
Thanks.
Mr. Walensky, take us home.
I will. Thank you. So with respect to information technology or IT-related bills, the IT legislation introduced this year ranges across the spectrum of IT-related issues, but many bills focus on addressing cybersecurity concerns and lack of broadband access to all of the community. The following are some of the bills that are of particular interest to the IT department. AB 14, this bill would authorize local educational agencies to report to the State Department of Education their pupils' estimated needs for computing devices and internet connectivity adequate for at-home learning. And the city has taken a support position on this bill, as it would strengthen the regional broadband capabilities and functions, which would be beneficial to Roseville and the entire region. Assembly Bill 34, this bill would enact the Broadband for All Act of 2022, which, if approved by the voters, authorizes the issuance of bonds by the state to support the 2022 Broadband for All program. The city has taken a watch position on this bill to understand what potential funding opportunities that might exist for Roseville and the region to improve and expand broadband capabilities and services. Assembly Bill 1076. This bill would require the Department of Justice to draft and make available on its internet website an automated license plate recognition system policy template for local law enforcement agencies. The city has taken a support position on this bill for the consistency it would provide to this technology. Having a standard format ensures local agencies and IT departments understand the expectations and are able to comply and share information more effectively. Assembly Bill 1391. This bill would make it unlawful for a person to sell, purchase, or utilize data that the person knows or reasonably should know is compromised data. The city has taken a support position on this bill for the new protections it will provide to people victimized by hacking incidents. Current law criminalizes computer hacking and stealing information in all forms. Nevertheless, some companies have seized the opportunity to turn a profit by selling data originally obtained by hackers. This bill would make it unlawful for a person to sell, purchase, or utilize data that the person knows or reasonably should know has been accessed or obtained to the commission of a crime. And then finally, AB 809. This bill would require certain state agencies to adopt and implement information security and privacy policies, standards, and procedures based upon standards issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the Federal Information Processing Standards. The city has taken a support position on this bill, as it would address weaknesses in the state's information security. It would seek to formally adopt information security standards and implement consistent oversight of these standards to ensure that the state agencies and departments comply with the standards and protocols. The state collects a tremendous amount of information from the city, and ensuring that the information is protected to the greatest extent possible is a critically important element of the process. With respect to other areas of interest, Assembly Bill 1322. At the March Law and Regulation meeting, the committee requested that staff bring back information on this bill. In summary, this bill would authorize the governing body of a city or a county to adopt a resolution declaring that a measure approved by the voters is unenforceable due to a conflict with state housing law. Upon adoption of a resolution, the city or county would be relieved of its duty to enforce or defend the conflicting provisions. The bill subjects the resolution to the validation procedures, which authorizes the adopting governing body or any interested party to seek a judicial determination regarding the validity of their resolution. The bill does not define which measures or types of measures are in conflict with state housing law. Rather, the bill proposes to provide local governments charged with implementing state housing laws, as well as their local measures, the ability to recognize a conflict between the two and take appropriate action. Once a conflict is recognized by the government charged with implementing the local measure, the bill allows the local government to resolve the conflict by promptly subjecting measures to the validation procedures provided in statute. The proponents of the bill contend that the bill honors local control by giving authority to city councils and enabling them to meet the requirements of state housing law. They contend that the bill will prevent needless litigation and help cities throughout the state attain a state-certified housing element. The opponents of the bill argue that the bill puts city councils in the position of Supreme Court justices, a role for which they are obviously entirely unsuited. Specifically, they hold that AB 1322 would empower them to commence proceedings to determine whether a local voter-approved initiative conflicts with state law. The city has taken a watch position on the bill to follow the amendments that might be taken on the bill and how those amendments would clarify the bill and possibly protect city councils from potential lawsuits over a city council's authority to take such actions. With respect to COVID-19, the American Jobs Plan, as you've heard from Amber and Noel, the American Jobs Plan has potential to provide significant funding opportunities for not only electric and environmental utilities, but for nearly all other city departments as well. We're watching 4 areas of particular concern that have to do with roads and bridges, public transportation. We're watching these sections for the potential funding opportunities they may present for transportation and infrastructure-related projects. Housing, and obviously we're watching this section for the funding opportunities it might present for addressing housing as well as homeless issues. And then broadband, as noted with in the IT section of my presentation, helping to keep and expand the connectivity of our community and the region is critically important, and we're looking to see what funding opportunities might exist when and if the plan is passed and signed by the President. The comprehensive infrastructure plan is beginning the long process through Congress, and the administration is very focused on the plan's approval. At this time, it's unclear what the final plan will include, but staff, as you've heard, is closely monitoring the progress of the infrastructure discussions to understand the funding opportunities that would exist for Roseville and the region if it is ultimately signed into law. And that concludes my presentation, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Mendoza.
No questions, Mark. Thank you for the great presentation. I'm just glad we're watching that AB 1322, because it would be nice if we could get some relief on the what I would refer to as just out of whack arena numbers that are being imposed upon us and other jurisdictions similar to us in size and land availability. So I'm glad to see we're watching that, and I appreciate you giving a detailed what each side believes is the pro and con on that, because that's always helpful for our residents to know as that moves through the process. So thank you.
Man, I just lost a bet with myself. I would have thought you were going to comment on AB 1391.
I have it on here. But
Comprised
I didn't want to
data.
take your thunder.
That's you're a subject matter expert in that, yes. Thank you all for your reports. This is really the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot going on and a lot that you track and try to keep us abreast of. I mean, I learned recently that, in December, with the omnibus bill, when it passed, they put something that I think is near and dear to every parent who sends their children to high school, and that is an amendment to the PAC Act, the Prevent Access to Children and Tobacco, to include vaping products, because the online sales of vaping products and flavored tobacco and other things are certainly, a major source of that, and so they're beginning to close. So there's so much going on in these thousands and thousands of pages of bills at the federal level that we really do appreciate, and then all the various bills and all the late nights and early mornings and, trying to, as somebody said to me today about my world of water quality, we have to make the irrational seem rational. So I thought that was a terrific way to explain some of these pieces of legislation and regulation. So thank you very much for your reports and then providing us the complete body of priority legislation. And I think it's just starting to warm up for you, right? Because, we're coming to the end of the House of Origin and, things will accelerate. So I think I'm supposed to open it up for public comment. Is that why you leaned in there? To see if there was public comment from anyone? So I'll open it up for public comment. We'll allow 30 to 45 seconds to see if the phone rings, but. All right, not hearing anything. I think we've come to the end of our agenda. Is that right, Madam City Attorney? So I will move to adjourn until the fourth Thursday of...
Wednesday.
Fourth one, is that it? It's been a long week already. Fourth Wednesday of May.